The opulent living room of the Beverly Hills mansion was submerged in a near-terrifying silence. The scent of lilies from the newly arranged memorial for Mrs. Eleanor Sterling mingled with the fresh ink smell of her last will and testament. Over 20 people, from biological children and adopted children to in-laws and grandchildren, all held their breath, their attention fixed on the attorney. The attorney, Mr. Davies, a man in his 40s with a stern expression, cleared his throat. The tense air grew even thicker. Then his voice cut through the silence, each word clear and sharp, echoing in a room accustomed only to laughter. I, Eleanor Sterling, being of sound mind and memory without constraint or undue influence of any person, do hereby declare this to be my last will and testament. I bequeath my entire estate, including Sterling Realty Group, 3 mansions in Los Angeles, and the entire balance of my bank accounts and stock portfolio, valued at an estimated $100 million, to Miss Lily Hayes, my adopted daughter. A deathly hush fell over the room. Then, like a slow-motion explosion, chaos erupted. Whispers, gasps, and muttered curses filled the air. Clara Eleanor's only biological daughter, who had always been the presumed heir, sat frozen in a leather armchair. Her eyes were wide, staring into nothingness, unable to process what she had just heard. $100 million. 3 homes. The entire company her parents had built from the ground up. All of it gone, turned to smoke by a single sentence. All eyes turned to Clara, waiting for a reaction. A scream, a sob, anything. But Clara did nothing. She just sat there, her face as white as a sheet. Then something no one expected happened. The corner of her mouth slowly curled upwards into a smile. It wasn't a smile of happiness, but a strange, distorted grin, as if she'd just heard the most absurd joke in the world, a cruel, cosmic punchline. She rose slowly to her feet, looked at no one, said nothing, and silently turned to leave. She left behind a family already descending into screams, accusations, and arguments. She left behind Lily, her adopted sister, whose head was bowed, her shoulders trembling violently. Clara walked away, her composure unnervingly steady, because she was the only one who knew, the only one in whom a terrible truth had just begun to dawn, that Will was likely a complete fabrication, a betrayal of her mother's true wishes. Just 3 days prior, the 3-story mansion on its exclusive Beverly Hills street still echoed with laughter. Eleanor Sterling, nicknamed the Queen of Bel-Air, had just celebrated her 70th birthday. Family and friends gathered from all over, a happy, bustling crowd. A lavish buffet was spread out, featuring a carving station, gourmet cheeses, and a vintage bottle of champagne she had been saving for a decade now, popped open for her guests. The atmosphere was warm and joyful. Clara, her 28-year-old daughter, radiant in an emerald silk dress, led her younger sister Lily by the hand, introducing her to everyone. Lily, an orphan, Eleanor had taken in at age 12, was now a beautiful, though somewhat shy 20-year-old. Clara beamed at the guests. "I picked out this dress for Lily myself. Doesn't she look gorgeous?" Everyone complimented Lily's beauty and praised Clara for being such a loving, thoughtful sister. Eleanor, seated at the head of the table, watched her 2 daughters with a look of deep affection. She pulled them both close, grasped their hands, and said gently, "Clara, Lily, you must always love and protect each other, just like real sisters. The fortune I leave behind is vast, but family is the most precious thing of all. You must remember that." Both Clara and Lily nodded obediently, their eyes shining with happiness. At that moment, Clara didn't notice the fleeting shadow of worry in her mother's eyes, something left unsaid. But all parties must end. That night, after the last guest had departed, Eleanor suffered a sudden heart attack. The sound of a glass shattering in her bedroom startled Clara and Lily awake. They rushed her to the hospital. The doctor diagnosed a minor stroke, a complication of her age, and a pre-existing heart condition. The family breathed a collective sigh of relief, assuming that a few weeks of rest would be all she needed. Ethan, Clara's cousin, even patted her on the shoulder and said, "You just focus on taking care of Aunt Eleanor. I'll handle things at the company." No one, not even Clara, understood that the stroke was the final warning. The next morning, still in her hospital bed, Eleanor secretly called her personal attorney. Her voice was weak over the phone. "Mr. Davies, I need you to draft a new will for me. It's urgent." That afternoon, while Clara was out getting soup for her mother, Eleanor called Lily into her hospital room. She took the young woman's slender hand, her eyes a mixture of love and desperation. She stroked Lily's hair and whispered, "Lily, listen to me. Something big is about to happen. Don't be afraid. I have a plan. No matter what happens, remember that everything I'm doing is to protect both of you." Lily didn't understand, but a knot of fear tightened in her stomach. She choked back sobs, tears streaming down her face. The following morning, Eleanor Sterling passed away peacefully in her sleep. Her sudden death left the entire family in a state of shock and grief. In the haze of funeral arrangements, no one gave a second thought to the newly notarized will locked away securely in the safe in Eleanor's home office. The living room, which just days before had been filled with joyous celebration, was now thick with an atmosphere so suffocating it was hard to breathe. The entire clan, from Eleanor's siblings to her nieces and nephews, was present. They sat in silence, their faces masks of impatience and greed. Mr. Davies stood before Eleanor's memorial photo, an official-looking document in his hands. His voice was low and firm. "To all family members present, in accordance with Mrs. Sterling's final wishes, I will now read the last will and testament which she prepared and had legally notarized 3 days before her passing." He began to read. When the decisive sentence, "I leave my entire estate to Lily, my adopted daughter," was spoken, the room imploded. Ethan, the cousin who had always seen himself as the rightful heir to the company, shot to his feet. He bit his lips so hard it drew blood, his eyes red-rimmed as he glared at Lily. "No way! What kind of spell did this little witch cast on my aunt?" Chloe, another adopted child taken in after Lily, slammed her hand on the coffee table. "This is absurd!" she shrieked. "She must have been coerced. Someone as sharp as her would never do this." The whispers turned into open insults. "A regular wolf in sheep's clothing. That ungrateful backstabbing con artist." Ethan's wife, Clara's sister-in-law, lost her composure completely. She lunged toward Lily, who was sitting in stunned silence. She swung her hand, and a sharp slap left a 5-fingered mark on Lily's cheek, sending the young woman reeling. In that instant, Clara, who had been silent, sprang up. Her face was still pale, but her eyes were like ice. "Enough!" she shouted, her voice cutting through the chaos and silencing everyone. "All of you stop! This was her decision. Whether she was of sound mind or not, who are you to judge? This is a legally executed will." Though she spoke the words, a violent storm raged inside her. She couldn't believe her own mother would abandon her like this. Was their lifelong bond worth less than a few years of charity to a stranger? She glanced at Lily, who kept her head down. Her hands clenched together, trembling. Something was deeply wrong. Mr. Davies, after letting the tension subside, added a warning. "This will contain a no contest clause. Any party who challenges this will or disrupts its execution will be automatically disinherited from any potential future distribution of assets should one occur." His words were a bucket of ice water on their fury. They fell silent. But it was not the silence of acceptance. It was the silence of hatred, envy, and calculation temporarily suppressed. Eyes like daggers remained fixed on the two sisters, Clara and Lily. The heavy front door of the mansion slammed shut behind Clara. She stood on the driveway holding a small suitcase containing only a few changes of clothes and essential toiletries. Her sister-in-law, Ethan's wife, had changed the locks that very morning. The elderly housekeeper, who had been with the family for over 20 years, slipped her the key to the side gate and a little cash. She looked at Clara with pity. "Take care of yourself, Miss Clara. Your mother is watching over you from heaven." Clara nodded, a lump forming in her throat. She walked out onto the street. The California sun was bright and harsh. The smell of grilled hot dogs from a street vendor's cart made her stomach rumble. She hadn't eaten since yesterday. Instead of calling a cab, she started walking. She wanted to feel the pain sharp and real. Eventually, she found a cheap motel in a rundown neighborhood, $60 a night. The room was barely 100 square feet, damp with the smell of old mildew. She tossed her suitcase on the floor and curled up on the discolored mattress. She pulled out her phone and started making calls. Her best friend, her work colleagues' relationships she once thought were solid. 15 calls. Some went to voicemail. Others answered, then quickly made an excuse to hang up after a few perfunctory questions. She understood. She was penniless now, the center of a family scandal. No one wanted to be associated with her. That first night in the motel, she couldn't sleep. The sound of distant sirens, the roar of motorcycles in the street, every noise felt like a knife in her heart. She sat up, opened her laptop, and wrote an email to Mr. Davies. Mr. Davies, with all your experience, do you truly believe that will represented my mother's real intentions? She hit send and stared at the screen, waiting in vain. There was no reply. The suspicion grew stronger. Was it her fault? Had she been too careless, not present enough in her mother's final days, allowing someone else to interfere? She tormented herself with guilt. While rummaging through her handbag, her fingers brushed against a folded stack of old papers. She pulled it out. It was her mother's previous will from 2018. A handwritten will in which Eleanor had clearly stated that 100% of her assets would go to Clara, her only biological daughter. Tears began to fall. Seeing her mother's familiar handwriting only strengthened her conviction. Her mother would never have changed her mind so drastically. There had to be a reason, something hidden behind it all. She clenched her jaw, a steely resolve forming within her. I will find the truth, she vowed. I will find out why Mom. Clara's first stop was the notary's office where the 2023 will had been validated. She needed to speak with Mrs. Haynes, the woman who had witnessed the signing. After several attempts, Mrs. Haynes, a kind-faced retiree with a guilty conscience, finally agreed to meet. My dear, I am so sorry, Mrs. Haynes whispered after making sure they were alone. That day, Mrs. Sterling didn't look well at all. She said something to me in private. She said, I'm doing this for a reason. If I don't do this, I'm afraid my own daughter will be cheated by the very people she trusts and pushed into terrible danger. Clara was stunned. The witness's words struck her like a bolt of lightning. Her mother hadn't abandoned her, she was trying to protect her. But protect her from what? And why in such a painful, cruel way? This clue led Clara to a small town in rural Ohio, Lily's hometown. She wanted to dig deeper into her adopted sister's past. She found an 80-year-old woman, a former neighbor who had witnessed Lily's unhappy childhood. The frail old woman sitting on a porch swing recounted the story. Poor little Lily. Her mother ran off with another man. She was left with her stepfather beaten every single day. The night your mother came and took her to Los Angeles was the night she ran away from home, her body covered in bruises. Clara sat on the edge of a vast cornfield listening to the story as tears streamed down her face. She understood now. Her mother, with her compassionate heart, wanted to give Lily a new life, a family. But was sympathy enough to give away an entire fortune numb? This reason still wasn't enough. Returning to L.A., Clara felt like a ghost. She searched through her mother's old belongings, hoping for another clue. And then, in an old wooden box where her mother kept important items, she found a USB drive and a few hastily scribbled notes. On the paper in her mother's shaky, broken handwriting were the words, Lily, tricked, $5 million debt, loan sharks. They threatened, if company not sold to pay Ethan's debt, they will kidnap Clara. Clara's heart pounded. Trembling, she plugged the USB drive into her laptop. A single audio file appeared. She clicked play. Her mother's hoarse, weak, and panicked voice filled the room, punctuated by dry coughs. Please, I'm begging you. Don't touch my daughter, Clara. She knows nothing. The debt belongs to Ethan and Chloe. Lily was foolish enough to be their guarantor. Now you're forcing her. Fine. I'll do what you want. I'll write the will. Give Lily everything. But you have to promise me. You'll cancel Ethan's debt, and most importantly, you will guarantee the absolute safety of my daughter Clara. Clara buried her face in her hands and wept. The choked, suppressed sobs of the past weeks finally broke free. So that was it. That was the truth. Her mother hadn't abandoned her. She had done all of this not out of excessive love for Lily, but to shield her, to save her from a danger she never knew existed. The will was a shield, a performance staged with the ultimate sacrifice and love of a mother. Armed with irrefutable proof, Clara immediately went to see Mr. Davies. She placed the USB drive and the scribbled notes on his desk. After listening to the entire recording, the attorney's normally composed face was a mask of shock and fury. "My God, I can't believe Mrs. Sterling was coerced to this extent," Mr. Davies said, his voice filled with indignation. "I was wrong to rely solely on the notarized document without investigating her circumstances more deeply." Clara's voice was now calm and firm. "Mr. Davies, a will created under threat and duress is legally void. I want you to help me get justice for my mother and for myself." Mr. Davies nodded decisively. "You're right. We have sufficient legal grounds. I will immediately prepare a petition to have the court declare the 2023 will invalid." The lawsuit was quickly filed with the Superior Court, along with all the evidence, the audio file, the notes, and further proof of Ethan and Chloe's gambling debts and dealings with loan sharks that Mr. Davies had his team uncover. 3 days later, while waiting for news from the court, Clara received a text from an unknown number. "Your grandparents need $200,000 for emergency surgery. If you can't provide it, don't be surprised when they disown you." She knew it was a ploy from her relatives to pressure her for money. She clenched her teeth and ignored it. She knew that for this drama to finally end, she needed the most important witness, Lily. It had been 5 years since the will reading and the two sisters hadn't spoken. Taking a deep breath, she dialed Lily's number. On the other end, Lily's voice was weak and filled with guilt. "Clara!" Upon hearing her sister's name, Lily broke down into sobs. "I'm so sorry. I never wanted to take anything from you. I just wanted a peaceful life." "I know," Clara said gently. "I don't blame you, but now we need to talk. Can you help me?" The two sisters met at a small, quiet coffee shop. Lily, through tears, told her everything. That night, Ethan had come to her room and threatened her, saying that if she didn't cooperate with their mother's plan, the creditors would harm not only her but Clara as well. He had painted a terrifying picture that left Lily so scared she had no choice but to go along with the charade. "Now I need you to sign this," Clara said, pushing a written statement in front of Lily, "confirming that you and our mother were forced by Ethan and Chloe to create that will." Without hesitation, Lily picked up the pen and signed her name. That night, back in her motel room, Clara took out her mother's old 2018 will. She held it to her chest, and for the first time in more than 2 turbulent weeks, she smiled. A smile of peace and hope. In November, the trial for the inheritance dispute began. The courtroom air was thick with tension. On the defendant's side, Ethan wore an expensive suit, a smug look on his face, while Chloe shot sarcastic, contemptuous glances at Clara. They were confident that with a legally notarized will, they couldn't lose. But when Lily, as a party with a direct interest in the case, took the stand, a murmur went through the courtroom. With the support of Mr. Davies and Clara's encouragement, Lily found the courage to tell the whole truth. She spoke of her abusive past, of being saved by Eleanor, of being tricked by Ethan and Chloe into co-signing for their debts, and finally of the night Ethan threatened her and forced her to participate in the will scheme. Mr. Davies presented the USB drive to the court. Eleanor's panicked, desperate voice filled the silent courtroom. The smug expressions on Ethan and Chloe's faces melted away, replaced by a pasty gray. Ethan began to shout denials, but it was too late. Mr. Davies forcefully cited the state's probate code, emphasizing the legal standard, "A valid will requires the testator to be of sound mind and free from fraud, duress, or undue influence." He formally requested that the court declare the 2023 will entirely void because it was created under coercion. After 3 tense sessions of fiery cross-examinations, the judge finally delivered the verdict. The gavel struck. The court hereby declares the will dated 2023 to be null and void. The court reinstates the last valid will executed in 2018. The entire estate is to be inherited by the beneficiary named therein, Miss Clara Sterling. Considering the circumstances of Miss Lily Hayes as a legal dependent who suffered significant emotional distress, the court orders that 10% of the total estate value be allocated to her as compensation. Ethan let out a crazed scream, slamming the table and cursing, but was immediately removed by court security for disrupting the proceedings. Out in the courthouse hallway when it was all over, Clara pulled Lily into a tight hug. They both cried, but this time they were tears of relief and happiness. Lily whispered between sobs, "From now on, we're sisters again. Mom's daughters will never be enemies." A week after the verdict, Clara returned to the Beverly Hills mansion. The heavy iron gates creaked open with a familiar sound, but this time her heart felt light. The house was the same, but the feeling was completely different. Her first act was to go to the memorial space and light a candle for her mother. She stood silently before the portrait, smiling through her tears. "Mom, I'm home. I got justice for you and for our family." She opened the safe and took out all the company stock certificates. She called the bank and arranged to restructure her cousin Ethan's debts, as he was now facing a separate trial for fraud and loan sharking. She decided to sell one of the 3 houses, using the money to establish a scholarship fund in her mother's name, dedicated to helping orphans from difficult backgrounds. And of course, she invited Lily to come live with her. That Christmas, the dining table in the grand mansion was set for only 2, but it was filled with laughter. Clara raised a cup of hot tea, looked at Lily and said, "Mom always taught me that no amount of money can compare to gratitude and human kindness." Lily nodded, her eyes glistening with happy tears. "Yes, I understand now, Clara." Together, they raised their cups, turning toward Eleanor's portrait. "Here's to what was lost coming back," Clara said, "but in a new form, the form of love and forgiveness." Have you ever seen greed cloud someone's judgment, or witnessed a family torn apart by inheritance? Leave a comment and share your story with us. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more journeys for justice that are full of emotion and humanity. And always remember, family is the most valuable asset, more precious than all the gold in the world. Conclusion: a will can divide property, but it can never break the true bonds of family if each of us holds on to a pure heart and a clear mind. Clara proved that through her own difficult journey. And you, what is the real treasure in your life? Like and subscribe and join us next day to hear about, does wealth really equal happiness?